welcome back. You are still watching Prime Life now. We did mention that to start off the show, we will be actually speaking to Jabu Zwane, and he will be speaking to us, about his expertise on how to triumph over the unique mental battles that many men face. Now, from societal expectations to personal struggles, he'll provide insights and strategies to empower men to prioritize their well being. Thank you so much for joining us, Jabu, and welcome to Prime Life. Please unmute yourself.
Yes. Sorry, good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Good to
Th-
see you.
Good to see you too, Jabu. Please take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, good evening and welcome to Monday Motivation. Yes, I mean, the important June, is normally a men's mental health month, but it's not such a well-known, what can I say, campaign. And we've been busy throughout this entire month doing different events, hosting different men discussions and roundtables. And yeah, there are a lot of issues that men are facing. And if we got to be very honest, it's also very true that a lot of us men have not been active participants in ensuring that we attend to our mental well-being. And this has actually led to quite a lot of challenges when it comes to understanding men's issues, especially as society. And that's why actually this evening I wanted to talk about that. That's when I get my notes out of here. And then I wanted to talk about like why it is so important for us as men to tend to our well-being, to understand the struggles that we are facing, and to actually be active participants in our own rescue. It's one thing to complain about what society is not doing, but it is yet another to understand that we as men are also part of that society. And that, as a matter of fact, we are actually responsible for a lot of policy, a lot of leadership, a lot of the economy, a lot of the education, a lot of the societal influence throughout the entire world and throughout all societies, and that we really need to start being serious about taking care of this. And I think one of the greatest challenges is that there is a lot of confusion about men's identity. If you look at a country like South Africa, especially given the history of our country, you would remember that one of the damages or one of the strategies of apartheid was to change people's names, was to change people's languages, was to also move people from their places of origin and place them in different places. Many people were displaced. And if you think about that, that does a lot of damage as far as people's identity. And you'd find that because of a lot of men are struggling with their own identity, then they struggle with finding their own purpose. And because they struggle to find their own purpose, they also struggle with being active members of society. Because what used to happen back in the days, especially during the apartheid times, was that, especially in your disadvantaged communities like townships, economic places were placed way far away from home, which basically meant that a lot of men worked away from home. And as a result, they sort of the habit of not being active members in changing society happened. And unfortunately, since apartheid ended and we entered into the democratic dispensation, this has not necessarily changed. It still continues to be exactly the same way, where you find that this has not changed at all. Um, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, my apologies, please. So and identity is crucial as far as really helping men to really generally have a good mental health. And the second part, because of the lack of identity, a lot of men struggle with purpose. And purpose is really about significance in the world. Every single one of us wants to know why we're here on earth. Both the question of identity and the question of purpose are existential questions. We want to know who we are. We want to know where we come from. We want to know why we are here. But it's very difficult to know then why you are here if you don't know who you are. And which then comes back to talking to the issues of redefining masculinity. We know that because of our history, especially with the rise of feminism, there are a lot of terminologies as far as the definition and the description of men is concerned that have become a bit problematic, such as masculinity. There are terminologies such as toxic masculinity. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of focus on what toxic masculinity is at the expense of not knowing what actually positive or productive or healthy masculinity is. And I believe that this is an important discussion for us to have, especially as men, especially as society, to know that as men, it's important for us to be healthy members of society, to attend to our mental challenges, to attend to our emotional challenges, to attend to the rising issues of isolation, of loneliness, of depression, of unfortunately self-unaliving. You know, people are really, taking their lives. I read the other day that so far this year, almost half a million men in the world have taken their own lives, and that is quite concerning. And that's because also, as far as this masculinity is concerned, there's this notion that men don't know how to ask for help. Men don't believe in being weak, and as a result, it's a matter of just like toughening it up and not and ignoring the signals of health that we need, especially when it comes to our emotions. We ignore our sadness, we ignore our sorrow, we ignore our pain, we ignore our confusion, we ignore a lot of the times the struggles and how they impacting us. And unfortunately, we end up then catching ourselves in trouble because we don't understand how these issues work. And the third one I want to talk about this evening is the issue of character. Along with identity and with purpose, it is important then for there to be some kind of a structure of character that us as men must have. My question to you is this: what is governing your principles? Do you even have them? What is governing your values? What are those when it comes to family? What are those when it comes to dealing with other people? What are those when it comes to actually leading yourself and holding yourself accountable to truth, accountable to the society that you're part of, accountable for the relationships that you are responsible for, especially when it comes to fatherhood and to being a husband. We know that in South Africa, almost 70% of South African children are growing up without the presence of a man, of a father in their lives. And this is, again, super, super concerning. And it's something that we need to understand that the absence of men in children's life, in society's life, has got dire consequences. Children are vulnerable to crime. Societies are vulnerable to crime also when men are not active members of society. And that is why character is a crucial part of building that manhood and building that being a man and making you feel like a person of significance. Because when you don't feel like you are important, when you don't feel like you are not needed, it's very difficult for you to experience your own self-worth. And I want to close off this evening and talk a little bit about, legacy and relationships. And legacy is really, before I go to legacy, talk about relationships. Almost every man that I talk to complains about some of these issues that they feel like they're only being used for what they have. If they don't have anything, if they don't have any money, if they don't have any job, then there tends to be disrespect. There tends to be people undermining them, and as a result, then they kind of feel that perhaps they're only important if they're doing something important. And if you're not doing anything of importance, then perhaps you deserve the disrespect, you deserve being undermined, you deserve being ignored. And this obviously weighs heavily on the mental health of a lot of men. You know, I saw today there was some other gentleman that wrote a book that to be a man is painful. I mean, like that's the title itself. And when I looked at how many people actually responded to that title and to that book, it was a lot. It was actually literally going viral, simply based on the title that to be a man is so difficult, or to be a man is so painful. But I don't want to sit here and talk about it from the point of being a victim, but to talk about it from the point of understanding that we've got to be answer the call to be active members in our own rescue, to understand that nobody's coming to rescue us, that we cannot depend only on women to be the ones that are constantly taking on societal issues. And if what I'm talking about perhaps feels like a little bit dramatic, here's my question to you: in your current community that you're in, outside of the initiatives that are being run by women, how many of them do you know that are being run by men, specifically aimed at men? There's a crisis, for example, with young boys that are being molested. The last stats that I looked at, they say almost 40% of young boys, by the time that they reach age 18, they would have experienced some kind of unhealthy touching and unhealthy contact with an adult in a very sexual way. 40%. And yet my question then became, if this is we know to be the truth, how many supporting centers do we have in the country that supports young boys that could have been exposed to this kind of danger? And yet there are so many, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of homes that deal specifically with women issues. Again, it's not to blame society and to blame women, but it is to call upon the consciousness, the activity, the energy, the capital, the resources, the presence of men to be actively involved in their own risk in this environment. And that's part of the reason why, in my team and I started what we call the Men of Change movement, which is again to talk about these types of issues, and to hold spaces where we can platform conversations and dialogue to talk about these issues. Because the big part of the relationship issues is that, if a man doesn't have a very good relationship with themselves, it's going to be very difficult for them to have a good relationship with their wife, to have a good relationship with their children, and to have a good relationship in general with other members in society. Because one of the other challenges that we have and that we're facing as far as fatherhood is concerned is that as much as we people call it fatherless, I think we've got a bigger problem that I call the unfathered. And the unfathered are children that have their fathers around and alive, but they are not actively involved in fathering them. And I suppose that also creates massive amounts of problems, especially to boy children who then grow up without having that example that can be able to follow, that they can be able to emulate. And then it creates obviously other problems as they get older. And so my question this evening, or my call this evening, it is not to put an indictment on society. It is not to say that if somebody has done something wrong, it's this and that's to be blamed, but it's to say, yes, whenever there are problems in society, we all have to band together. We all have to come together to tackle them. And right now, the statistics are out. There is a pandemic of loneliness. There is a pandemic of drug use. There is a pandemic of betting, especially gambling online. One of the statistics that I checked on was they talked about the fact that in South Africa, almost a trillion rands, like 1.4 trillion rands, is spent every year on online betting, and 77% of those people who are betting are obviously men. There are men. 77% of people who are betting online are men. And if you're looking at that and looking at the statistics as far as credit ratings, as far as who's purchasing, especially right now, houses, who's buying up new credit, it's not men. Men are falling behind in a lot of ways. And even also in schools, young boys are falling behind in high school. They're completing high school at a much lower rate. They're completing university at a much lower rate. They also are starting to be out earned in the marketplace as well. And so there is a crisis. And we cannot sit around and wait for things to be sorted out. And I think a big part of this is that also we've got we battle with our emotions. We battle with our emotions because we have bought into this idea that we're not supposed to be sad, we're not supposed to be hurt, we're not supposed to be, in sorrow, we're not supposed to be confused. We should not experience any of those emotions that we think are weakening us as men. And we tend to normally shortcut our emotions to anger, because somehow anger seems to be the one emotion that not just men themselves, but even society responds to a lot when a man is displaying. And yet, when other emotions, when they're displaying other emotions, there doesn't seem to be that much of a response when it comes to that. And I think that's partly one of the reasons why, for a lot of us men, as opposed to saying, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm confused, I'm fearful, I'm anxious, whatever the case might be, we just quickly say, I'm angry, because anger also sort of gives you that pseudo control. Because then when you are angry, you tend to be the one that is running the script in the environment, because people are worried about you may do something that may hurt somebody, or you may do something that may hurt yourself. And therefore, anger then tends to be a very powerful force that gets people to respond to you as a man. But this is unhealthy, because anger cannot be the only emotion in the bouquet or in the spectrum of all the emotions that we're experiencing as human beings. It is okay for us to say that, you know what, I am feeling a little bit weak and I need a bit of help. I'm feeling a bit sad and it can do with some counseling, some company. I'm feeling a bit more fearful and I can do with a bit of encouragement, and we can do with a bit of companionship. Because if we do not do this, we're going to find ourselves and we're going to continue to see these problems escalating and getting worse and worse. And again, the statistics are out, especially when you're looking at your first world countries, when you're looking at South Africa, when you're looking at, even many countries here on the continent. Whenever I talk about these issues online, they tend to grab so much attention because these are the problems that a lot of us men are experiencing. And I would say, if we do not fix the way that we see ourselves in terms of our masculinity, we'll continue to we'll try to live up to these expectations. And that's another battle that we have to overcome. The battle of expectations. There are false expectations, there are unrealistic expectations, and there are also these very unclear expectations that we're just picking up somewhere along the way. And this is the question that I'm going to have to ask you. When you're feeling a little bit down and oppressed as a man, can you be able to identify specifically what it is that you feel makes you feel that way? What makes you feel oppressed? What makes you feel unloved? What makes you feel disrespected? What makes you feel insignificant? What is it that makes you feel like you don't look forward to waking up in the morning, that you'd rather hide away, that you don't want to even socialize? What are those things? Because if you don't identify those things, then it's very difficult for you to process them mentally. As many psychologists normally say, if you cannot name it, you won't understand it. And if you don't understand it, you cannot manage it. And if you cannot manage it, then you will not be able to deal with it. And this is very, very important for us to understand. So what are those things? Because if we don't do these things, we're going to find ourselves again running behind, falling behind, which is another big challenge as men, is the challenge of time, that we miss deadlines. We feel like we are running behind as far as clock and as far as success is concerned, because you find yourself at a certain age and you're thinking to yourself, for a man, I'm supposed to be having a house, I'm supposed to be earning this much money per month, and I'm supposed to be able to afford this and to do that, and all of that. And when you're not in that place, you find yourself then feeling very oppressed and feeling very, very depressed. And there's so much that we can talk about as far as this is concerned. But I think it's important for us as men to understand the battles that we're facing. I was not able to go through all of them. I normally have these 12 battles that men have to go through. I've given you a few. I've talked about identity, I've talked about purpose, I've spoken about character, I've spoken about legacy and relationships, and I've spoken about emotions and time. All right, I want to say thank you so much this evening for taking the time to watch. My name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your programming. I'll see you again next week.